Have you ever felt that inexplicable emptiness when you look at someone and know you can never reach it? That feeling that burns you inside, as if your whole being shout in silence while you maintain a smile. You may be here because you are looking for answers, or maybe the algorithm brought you for a reason that you don't even understand yourself. It doesn't matter. What matters is that there is something inside you that knows that you deserve more, that can conquer what it seems impossible. Today I am going to reveal something that has remained hidden for centuries, a method that Machiavelli himself kept in his most intimate manuscripts, and that was never published with The Prince. If what I am about to tell you already makes you feel that spark of curiosity, I like it right now, because what you will discover in the next minutes could completely transform your way of relating. This is not a cheap trick or a passing technique. It is an ancient and powerful philosophy that awakens something primitive to who receives it. Prepare to enter a maze where power and desire intertwine in ways that you never imagined. In the depths of the National Library of Florence, between yellowish manuscripts and the aroma of old paper that challenges the centuries, there is a document that few eyes have contemplated. It does not appear in official catalogs or authorized biographies. It is as if the story itself had decided to hide it, aware of the power it contains among its aged lines. He took years of research, contacts in places that I cannot mention, and personal sacrifices that still torment me on insomnia nights to access these forbidden pages. Nicholas Machiavelli, that name that resonates with the coldness of political calculation, wrote these pages in his last days, when the fever and extreme lucidity that precedes death allowed him to see crystalline clarity, the human nature in his most naked form. It is no accident that these writings remain hidden. They were not conceived for the vulgar or for those who seek rapid and superficial solutions. They were the final legacy of a man who understood that power over others begins with power over oneself. I remember the first time I held those pages in my trembling hands. The archivist looked at me with a mixture of complicity and warning while leading me to an isolated room, only illuminated by a desk lamp that projected danceful shadows on the bare walls. "No one should know that you've seen this," he told me before closing the door behind him. At that time, I did not understand the severity of his warning. Today, while I share these secrets with you, I am fully aware of the risk I assume. The first lines of the manuscript left me breathless. They did not speak of states or princes, but about something much more fundamental, the art of conquering hearts without pronouncing a single word of love. Machiavelli had distilled in those yellowish pages the very essence of human desire, the invisible architecture that supports all deep and lasting attraction. It was not a seduction manual like those that proliferate today, full of surface tricks and empty promises. It was something much deeper and disturbing, a map of the human soul and its most hidden desires. Have you ever wondered why some people generate such a powerful attraction that is almost magnetic? Have you observed how certain individuals, without being particularly attractive according to conventional canons, arouse rapture passions in those around them? It is not a coincidence or an innate gift. It is the result of understanding and applying principles that have existed since the first human being felt the stab of desire for another. Machiavelli's manuscript revealed these principles with clarity that left me breathless. Page after page unraveled the hidden mechanisms of human desire, invisible levers that move wills and arouse unstoppable passions. The most surprising was the underlying simplicity throughout the system. Like all the great truths, it could be reduced to fundamental principles that, once understood, seemed obvious, and yet they remain hidden for most. While reading those pages in the Morsen light of that lonely lamp, I felt a chill to travel my spine. It was not fear, but the recognition of something deeply true. Each word resonated with experiences he had lived, with situations he had observed, with dynamics that he had sensed without fully understanding. It was as if Machiavelli had put in words something that had always been there, in front of my eyes, invisible by his own obvious. What I am about to share with you are not superficial or manip techniques, cheap orations. It is a deep knowledge about human nature, about the abysses and summits of the soul, about the secret desires that we all house and rarely confess, not even ourselves. It is a knowledge that, like any true power, entails immense responsibility. Use it with wisdom or attentive to the consequences of arousing forces that you might not be able to control. There is a fundamental principle that Machiavelli discovered observing not only the great statesmen of his time, but also the intimate relationships between powerful men and women. He called it il vuoto strategico, the strategic vacuum. Nature, as Florentino knew well, hates the void. We create an absence, and everything around us will desperately try to fill it. It is the most basic law of human desire, as inevitable as gravity. Think of the last times that you were completely captivated by someone. Wasn't that person who never handed you everything, who maintained a part of himself inaccessible, as an unexplored territory that aroused your most primitive instinct of conquest? It is not coincidence. It is the strategic emptiness in action, that space deliberately created that acts as an irresistible magnet for desire. Most men make the same fatal mistake again and again. They deliver everything too soon. They become predictable, transparent, completely legible for those who want to conquer. And at that same moment, without knowing it, they have sown the seeds of their own irrelevance. As Machiavelli wrote in those forbidden pages, whoever delivers completely will soon be possessed and then forgotten. Whoever maintains a secret kingdom within himself will be eternally desired. This emptiness is not simple emotional distance or the children's game of appearing disinterest. It is much more subtle and powerful. It is deliberately cultivating aspects of your being that remain inaccessible, not by superficial strategy, but because there are really dimensions of yourself that are only yours, territories of your soul that no one can claim. This inner sovereignty, this refusal to deliver the complete keys of your kingdom, is what awakens an insatiable curiosity who wishes you. I remember Carlos, a friend who seemed to have a natural gift to attract the most beautiful and interesting women. It was not particularly attractive according to conventional standards, nor did it possess riches or high social status. For years I observed his behavior, trying to decipher his secret. One day, after several glasses that loosen their tongue, always cautious, he confessed to me, "I never deliver my last thought. I always keep something for me." At that time, I did not understand the depth of its revelation. Years later, when reading Machiavelli's manuscript, those words charged a completely new meaning. The strategic vacuum operates at multiple levels. It's not just about maintaining mystery about your thoughts or feelings. It is also to master the art of intermittent presence, to alternate periods of intense connection with moments of significant absence. It is to control the dose of yourself that you deliver to the world, creating artificial shortage of your presence, thus generating a much greater perceived value than would have a constant availability. Modern research in psychology confirms what Machiavelli sensed centuries ago. The scarcity principle is one of the most powerful motivating of human behavior. We value more what we perceive as scarce or difficult to obtain. When you become a constant, predictable, and completely available presence, your perceived value inevitably decreases. Not because your intrinsic value has changed, but because human psychology works at such a fundamental level that escapes our conscious control. Implementing strategic vacuum requires a strong discipline and deep self-knowledge. You must identify those aspects of yourself that will remain inaccessible, not as an artificial pose, but as a conscious decision to maintain your inner sovereignty. You must learn to dose your presence not by manipulation, but out of respect for your own value. You must cultivate interests and passions that exist independently of any relationship, thus creating a center of their own gravity that is magnetic for those around you. Machiavelli's manuscript detailed specific exercises to develop this capacity. One of the most powerful consisted of what he called the fasting fast, deliberate periods in which you refrain from sharing your thoughts, feelings, or experiences, even when you feel the almost irresistible impulse to do so. This exercise, regularly practiced, strengthens the muscles of emotional autonomy and teaches you that you do not need the constant validation of your object of desire. The most fascinating of strategic vacuum is that, correctly implemented, benefits both parties. It is not manipulation that leaves the other person diminished or exploited. On the contrary, your emotional autonomy and inner wealth become a mirror where she can contemplate her own unexplored potential. Your strategic vacuum becomes a space where your desire can be freely deployed, where your imagination can project your own fantasies and desires. In the most enigmatic pages of the forbidden manuscript, Machiavelli describes what he calls ill-stopped seed-out pottery, the paradox of the assigned power. This principle, which contradicts the most basic intuition on the functioning of power in human relations, argues that the greatest power is achieved precisely at the time it seems that you are delivering it. Most men, driven by a primitive understanding of power, try to dominate, control, direct every aspect of their interaction with whom they want. This approach, according to Florentino, is condemned to failure because it arouses immediate resistance, both conscious and unconscious. The true teacher of relational power understands that it must create the illusion that it is the other who has control, while subtly orchestra each movement from the shadows. Imagine a dance where your partner believes that he is guiding, when in reality it is you who created the space for her to move exactly as you want. This is the essence of the paradox of assigned power. It is not weakness or submission. It is a higher form of power that operates from a deeper level of understanding of human psychology. Machiavelli illustrated this principle with the story of Lorenzo de' Medici, who in the most critical moments of political negotiations deliberately adopted a position of apparent vulnerability. He let their adversaries felt that they had the pan for the handle, wrote the Florentino, and precisely at that time of false security, when they went down their guard convinced of their victory, Lorenzo obtained exactly what he had planned from the beginning. How does this paradox manifest in the field of seduction and intimate relationships? Through what Machiavelli called the technique of the veiled mirror. It consists of subtly reflecting the deepest wishes of the other person, making him believe that he is following his own path, when he is actually traveling a path that you have carefully drawn for her. To implement this technique, you must first become a meticulous student of the person you want. Look without judging. Listen not only to his words, but the silences between them. Pay attention to what topics illuminate your gaze, what stories they accelerate your breathing, what values mentions repeatedly, even casually. You are not collecting this information to use it against them, but to create a space where she can experience the fullest and most authentic version of herself. Once you have mapped its inner territory, you begin to create significant coincidences, situations that seem to emerge spontaneously, but that you have actually orchestrated based on your knowledge of their deepest desires. You may casually mention a book that you know resonates with its philosophy of life. You may take it to a place that connects with a childhood memory that shared you, or you introduce into the conversation a topic that touches a passion that she rarely has the opportunity to express. These are not empty manipulations, but invitations to a deeper connection. You are creating a space where she can be fully deployed, where she feels deeply seen and understood. And the most powerful, she will attribute this extraordinary sensation to a natural compatibility, to an almost magical connection, without perceiving the invisible architecture that you have built precisely to experience that sensation. The manuscript detailed a specific exercise to master this technique. Machiavelli called him the game of the three truths. It consists of identifying three fundamental truths about the person you want. A truth about his past that has molded him deeply, a truth about his present that causes him internal conflict, and a truth about his future aspirations that perhaps he has not openly shared with anyone. Once these three truths have been identified, you create situations where she can explore and express them, always under the illusion that she has been her own initiative. The paradox of assigned power requires a sophisticated understanding of human nature and an ego strong enough to not need immediate recognition. You must be willing to operate from the shadows, to renounce credit for your actions, to allow it to believe that each discovery, every moment of connection, each advance in the relationship has been his initiative. The most fascinante of this principle is that, applied correctly, creates a dynamic where both parties obtain exactly what they want. She experiences freedom and autonomy that strengthens her own identity, while you get a much deeper and more lasting connection than you could get through obvious control tactics. As Machiavelli warned in a note outside these pages, this power is like the water that filters between the rocks, invisible, patient, apparently weak, and yet capable of sculpting whole mountains to his will. The paradox of assigned power does not produce instant results. It is a long-term investment that requires strategic patience, but its fruits, as Florentino knew, are incomparably more durable and satisfying than those obtained through more direct and primitive approaches to relational power. Always remember that true power does not need to be screaming. It operates in silence, with elegance, creating realities where all participants feel that they are exercising their free will, when they are actually dancing to the rhythm of a music that you have composed especially for them. Among the most powerful principles that Machiavelli revealed in his secret manuscript is what he called l'alchimia delle emozioni contrastanti, the alchemy of contrasting emotions. This principle argues that the most powerful and lasting attraction does not arise from providing a uniform and pleasant emotional experience, but of deliberately creating an emotional landscape of marked contrasts and unpredictable transitions. Human nature, as the Florentino observed, is designed to quickly adapt to constant emotional states, by pleasant that these are. A relationship that exclusively provides security, comfort, and constant affirmation soon becomes invisible for our nervous system, such as the ticking of a clock that we stop listening after a few minutes. It is the contrast, the variation, the alternation between opposite emotional states that keeps interest alive and ignites desire at levels that emotional consistency can never reach. Machiavelli illustrated this principle with a musical metaphor. A sustained note, however beautiful, soon becomes background noise. It is the dance between sound and silence, between tension and resolution, which creates a melody that persecutes the listener even in dreams. In the same way, a relationship that alternates moments of intense connection with periods of significant distance, episodes of deep emotional security, with moments of calculated uncertainty, creates a relational melody impossible to ignore or take for granted. The implementation of this principle requires a deep understanding of emotional psychology and exceptional control over your own external manifestations. It is not about being intentionally inconsistent or playing with the feelings of others for mere whim. It is a sophisticated art that consists in orchestrating a rich and multidimensional emotional experience that reflects the real complexity of authentic human relations. The manuscript detailed specific techniques to dominate this emotional alchemy. One of the most powerful is what Machiavelli called il ritiro calcolato, the calculated withdrawal. It consists of, after a period of intense emotional connection where the other person feels deeply seen and valued, deliberately introduce a brief period of emotional distance. Not coldness or rejection, but a subtle retraction of your full emotional presence. This movement, executed with adequate precision and delicacy, produces a fascinating effect on the psychology of those who experience it. After having tried the nectar of the deep connection with you, its sudden absence creates a void that generates a powerful psychological response, an intensified desire to recover that state of connection, an immediate revaluation of what until recently could be given for granted, and, the most important thing, a mental projection where she herself begins to idealize and attribute qualities that you may not even have shown explicitly. Another fundamental technique is l'oscillazione calibrata, the calibrated oscillation. It involves deliberately alternating between showing different and apparently contradictory aspects of your personality. One day, you are the perfect listener, all empathy and emotional understanding. The next, you show yourself focused on your projects, with an intensity that leaves no room for anything else. A moment you are playful and light, the next deep and philosophical. This constant but calibrated oscillation creates an experience of perpetual discovery, where she feels that there are always new layers of your being to explore. The fascinating thing about these techniques is that they do not need to pretend personalities that do not possess. We all have multiple facets, various emotional abilities, contradictory aspects in our personality. Most people, however, tend to present a limited and predictable range of these aspects in their relationships, unconsciously seeking a coherence that, although it can provide initial comfort, inevitably leads to boredom and predictability. The alchemy of contrasting emotions invites you to express the complete range of your being, not to restrict yourself to a one-dimensional version of yourself that you think will be safe or pleasant. This multifaceted authenticity, far from confusing or moving away, creates a magnetic attraction precisely because it reflects the true complexity of the human being. It is important to note that these techniques are firmly anchored in authenticity. It is not about manufacturing non-existent emotions or aspects. If you tried, you would generate dissonance and incoherence that would be immediately perceived as manipulation. It is rather to allow you to freely express the whole spectrum of your authentic being, including those facets that you would normally keep hidden for fear of rejection or misunderstanding. Machiavelli's manuscript included a crucial warning about this principle. Emotional alchemy practiced without solid interior center is poison for those who exercise it and for those who receive it. This means that to effectively implement these techniques, you must have a stable internal nucleus, a clear understanding of who you are and what you represent. Without this center, the alchemy of contrasting emotions becomes simple emotional inconsistency that generates confusion and eventually removal. The ultimate beauty of this principle is that paradoxically, this dance of emotional contrasts creates in the long term a much more stable and lasting connection than that could be achieved through an emotionally flat and predictable approach. Like a musician who understands that tension and resolution are both necessary to create a memorable composition, you are creating a relational experience that contains all the wealth and complexity necessary to sustain itself over time. As Machiavelli wrote in a marginal note of these pages, who dominates the alchemy of contrasting emotions will never be forgotten, because he becomes not a person, but a complete universe to explore. One of the most revolutionary concepts of the prohibited manuscript of Machiavelli is what he called l'effetto specchio reverse, the reverse mirror effect. This principle challenges our intuitive understanding of how attraction and desire in human relationships develops and reveals a counter, intimately but deeply effective truth. Conventional wisdom tells us that to be desired we must project a perfect image, highlight our most admirable qualities, and carefully hide our vulnerabilities and imperfections. Machiavelli, in his genius, discovered exactly the opposite. The deepest and most lasting desire does not arise from perceived perfection, but from the strategic and calibrated revelation of your own vulnerability, insecurities, and internal contradictions. The reason is surprisingly simple but deep. When you exclusively show your most polished and admirable aspects, create an insurmountable distance between you and the other person. You become an object of admiration, perhaps even envy, but not a being with whom an authentic and transformative connection can be established. By strategically revealing your vulnerabilities, on the contrary, you create a mirror where she can recognize and accept her own. This reverse mirror operates at an unconscious level, deactivating the natural defenses that we all maintain against true intimacy. When you perceive that someone is allowed to be imperfect in your presence, your nervous system receives a powerful sign. It is safe to be real here. This sense of psychological security is the most fertile terrain for authentic and lasting desire to flourish. Implementing this principle requires a delicate balance. It is not an indiscriminate confession of all your weaknesses and insecurities, which would only generate discomfort and possibly contempt. It is a subtle art that consists in carefully selecting what vulnerabilities reveal, when to do so, and for what purpose. Machiavelli distinguished between what he called connection vulnerabilities and disconnection vulnerabilities. The first are those that, when revealed, create bridges of mutual empathy and recognition. The second, on the contrary, arouse discomfort, pity, or rejection. The master of the reverse mirror effect knows how to distinguish instinctively between both categories and operates exclusively with the former. An example of connection vulnerability could be sharing you in the moment you doubted yourself before undertaking an important project, or confess that sometimes you feel inappropriate in certain social contexts despite your apparent confidence. These revelations, far from reducing your perceived value, humanize you and create a space where the other person can recognize similar aspects in itself that perhaps have never been able to express openly. The manuscript detailed a specific exercise to dominate this technique called calibrated confession. It consists of selecting 3 personal vulnerabilities, one related to your past, an insecurity of childhood that you have exceeded to a large extent, one related to your present, an aspect of yourself with which you continue to fight actively, and one related to your future aspirations, a fear or doubt about your ability to achieve something you really want. These 3 vulnerabilities are gradually revealed at carefully selected times when the emotional connection has already reached a certain level of depth. The key is in the way of sharing them, not from self, pity, or seeking comfort, but from the quiet self, acceptance of those who understand that their imperfections are an integral part of their humanity. The most fascinating the reverse mirror effect is that, paradoxically, these calibrated vulnerability revelations do not decrease your status or power in the relationship, but increase it significantly. By showing that you do not need to maintain a facade of perfection, you demonstrate much more powerful and attractive internal security than any invulnerability mask. This dynamic creates what Machiavelli called the virtuous cycle of authenticity. This shared authenticity generates a unique connection that she does not experience in other relationships. This emotional exclusivity, in turn, intensifies desire and attraction towards you in a way that transcends the purely physical or superficial. It is important to note that this principle does not work as an isolated tactic or as a trick to manipulate others. It must arise from a genuine practice of self-knowledge and self-acceptance. The reverse mirror effect is simply the external manifestation of a deep inner work, where you have learned to embrace your own contradictions and imperfections as an integral part of who you are. The manuscript included a crucial warning. Whoever pretends vulnerability without truly integrated it creates a dissonance that will be unconsciously perceived, generating distrust instead of connection. This means that for this principle to work effectively, you should have done the inner work to reconcile with your own shadows and vulnerabilities. You cannot authentically share what you have not accepted first in yourself. The ultimate beauty of the reverse mirror effect is that mere seduction transcends to become a path to genuinely transformative relationships. When creating a space where both can shed masks and defenses, you establish the conditions for a connection that not only satisfies immediate desire, but also nourishes the soul in the long term. As Machiavelli wrote in the final pages of this section, the greatest power does not reside in seems invulnerable, but in transforming vulnerability itself into a source of connection so deep that no external force can break it. In the final pages of the forbidden manuscript, Machiavelli revealed what he considered the culminating principle of his system, which integrated and enhanced all the above. He called him il rituale del riconoscimento profondo, the ritual of deep recognition. This principle transcends conventional seduction techniques to enter an almost mystical territory, where attraction and desire reach transformative dimensions. The fundamental premise of this principle is as simple as revolutionary. The deepest and most irresistible desire does not arise from being worshipped or idealized, but from being truly seen and recognized at levels that not even the person is fully aware of hosting within himself. Machiavelli observed that all human beings load within us complete dimensions of our personality, talents, qualities, and potentialities that remain invisible to the outside world, and even for our own consciousness. These hidden aspects of being constitute what he called il ben nascosto, the hidden self. The ritual of deep recognition is to develop the ability to perceive these hidden aspects in the other person and reflect them back to it so that they can recognize them as their own. It is not about simple adulation or projecting imaginary qualities, but about an almost shamanic act of perception and collecting nomination of what really exists, but remains in the shadow. Implementing this principle requires developing what Machiavelli called the look that is going through veils. It is an intensified form of attention where you observe not only the obvious words and behaviors of the other person, but also the subtle patterns that reveal their unplayed qualities, their unpasted desires, their sleeping potentialities. The manuscript detailed specific exercises to develop this capacity. One of the most powerful was contemplation without judgment, which consists in observing the person for extended periods with full and devoid of categorization or evaluation. You are not looking to confirm what you already think about knowing about it, but allowing it to reveal itself in its multidimensional complexity. Once you have glimpsed aspects of the hidden self of the other person, the next step is to reflect them back to it, not by means of explicit direct or fulfillment, but through what Machiavelli called the oblique mirror, indirect communication forms that allow the person to recognize these qualities as their own without feeling exposed or vulnerable. It could be through a carefully formulated question that invites you to explore an aspect of itself that it rarely expresses, or by creating a context where they can naturally manifest qualities that normally remain asleep, or simply through your way of responding to it, which implicitly communicates that you are perceiving deepest dimensions of their being that others fail to see. The extraordinary thing about this principle is the effect it produces on who experiences it. When someone feels that authentic but ignored parts of their being have been seen and recognized, there is an emotional response of an incomparable intensity with any other relational experience. Machiavelli described him as a luminous wound, an opening in the usual defenses that allows a direct connection with the most authentic nucleus of the person. This experience generates what modern psychologists would call safe attachment, an emotional bond characterized by deep confidence and sensation of psychological security. The person develops a connection with you that transcends the rational or the merely physical, because you have played parts of their being that even herself fully recognized. The ritual of deep recognition operates at multiple levels simultaneously. At the conscious level, the person experiences the unique sensation of being truly seen and valued. At an unconscious level, psychological integration processes are activated where fragmented or repressed aspects of the self begin to return to conscious identity. And at the relational level, a link that she will perceive as completely unique and irreplaceable is established. It is important to note that this principle requires absolute authenticity to function effectively. You cannot pretend this form of deep perception or reflect qualities that you do not really perceive. Any attempt of manipulation or insincerity at this level will be instantly detected, not necessarily consciously, but through the somatic and emotional intelligence that we all possess. The manuscript included a solemn warning about this principle. Who practices the ritual of deep recognition assumes a sacred responsibility, because seeing the hidden self of another human being, he becomes a witness and catalyst of his transformation. This power, misused, can cause invisible but permanent injuries. This warning underlines the ethical dimension of these principles. They are not simple techniques of superficial seduction, but tools of deep relational transformation that can have lasting effects on the psyche of those who experience them. Using them exclusively to satisfy selfish desires without considering the welfare of the other is not only ethically questionable, but inevitably turns against those who practice them. The ultimate beauty of the ritual of deep recognition is that, implemented with integrity and authenticity, creates a form of connection that transcends the usual dynamics of power and desire to become a space of mutual transformation. Not only do she feel deeply attracted to you, but both experience an expansion of consciousness and psychological integration that would not be possible otherwise. As Machiavelli wrote in the conclusion of this section, the greatest power is not to make another one, but to create a space where both can recognize and manifest dimensions of themselves that remained hidden even for their own eyes. Now that you have gone through this forbidden labyrinth, that you have glimpsed the secrets that Machiavelli kept only for those capable of understanding its true meaning, finds us in that dangerous threshold where knowledge can become power or destruction. What you have learned is not a simple method. It is a scalpel that can open the human soul, yours and that of others. Each principle you have discovered today implies a responsibility that few are willing to assume. The strategic vacuum, the paradox of assigned power, emotional alchemy, the reverse mirror, and the ritual of deep recognition are not tools to manipulate. They are keys to unlock connections that transcend the superficial. Who does not understand this, who uses these secrets merely to satisfy his ego, will soon discover that he has summoned forces that he cannot control. The doors you have opened today cannot be closed. The prohibited manuscript of Machiavelli now lives in you. If this knowledge has resonated deep in your being, if you have felt that chill of recognition while the words penetrated your mind, leave your signal in the comments. Invisible power has found me, and it remains attentive because there are even more prohibited manuscripts, even deeper secrets than I will reveal only to those who prove to have truly integrated what they have received today.